Hey guys, it's Bill from Linden, Tennessee. So I had a guy comment on one of my videos, I think the most recent video, the test drive video. He was curious about the drivetrain and the layout that I have and, any kind of issues that I ran into and angles and all that stuff. And I haven't actually done a very detailed video on constructed. I've done some construction videos, but not constructed videos. So I'm going to do that. I want to do a brief, or even maybe not even brief, but an overview of everything on the Jeep. And there's quite a lot. I've done quite a lot of things to this poor thing. But I think what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to start on the bottom and work up. And this may be a multi-part. This may be a not a multi-part, but we'll see how it goes. But first, I'll, introduce you. This is a 1997 Jeep Wrangler TJ, and I'm not sure if it was a SE or a Sport or anything. I think it was just a basic, low trim SE. It was a soft top, had 4-cylinder, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, and a 5-speed manual transmission, and that was it. It had air conditioning, but it didn't even have intermittent wipers. So I think it was a pretty low spec vehicle other than the air conditioning. Yeah, so that's the outside. When I got it, it had a 2-inch lift on the front and a no-inch lift on the back. So it had the Tennessee squat, as they call it here. It's what the kids are doing these days. I hope they stop. But yeah, let's go underneath and look what we can see. Maybe I can do this without making anybody seasick. So let's start at the front here. Well, I guess we should start at the middle. That's where all the fun stuff is. All right, so this is a Tesla Performance large drive unit, straight out of a Model S, P100 or P90 or whatever it was, but it was a performance model. And it has a maximum horsepower of about 500 and something or other. And torque is 400 and something or other pound for the torque at the motor. And then you go and multiply that through all the gears. From the factory, this had I think it's a 9.3, something like that, 9.38 to 1 gears inside of it. So it goes from the motor, which is actually this part right here, goes through a series of gear reductions. So the motor can spin up to about 16 or 18,000 RPM, and then it goes from the factory. It went through a 9 to 1, and then it goes out the drive shaft. Well, I took those 9 to 1 gears out and put 4.5 to 1 gears in it, because what would happen is if I kept the 9 to 1s in there, the lowest gears I can possibly put in Jeep differentials is 3.07 to 1 gears, and if you had 9 to 1 and you multiply that by 3 to 1, you end up with 27 to 1. And anybody knows about gearing, 27 to 1 is obscene. That's like tractor gears. So I would have had a top speed of like 45 or 50 miles an hour. I would have had a lot of torque, but I'd have never had enough traction to even use that torque, so it wouldn't have mattered. So anyway, 4.5 to 1, and then down to 3 to 1 differentials. So that makes about 12 or 13 to 1 final drive, which is still pretty high. Like I said, the Tesla itself uses 9.3 to 1, and I've got 13. So I've got more low-end torque than a Tesla, so I guess if we hooked up bumper to bumper and just started pulling, I would win, which is kind of cool. I think my differentials would probably explode before that happened, but anywho, I digress. So to get this sucker in here, I guess the next part to introduce is this long arm suspension kit. This is a long arm suspension kit from Iron Rock suspension, and so from the factory, these long arms would have actually been about this long, been about half as long, and they would have tied into the frame, roughly up here, and then gone down at a much steeper angle. I replaced those with this long arm suspension kit, and as it turns out, I really wish I hadn't done this. This has been a pain in the butt. It's just always in the way, and it's difficult to adjust, and it's made converting and running wires and tubing and stuff just made it that much more difficult, mostly because of this part right here. I don't have access to the frame. Normally on a conversion, you'll run all the fuel or run all the power lines and any anything against the frame. That's just what you do. But I don't have access to the frame, so I couldn't do that. I had to find other places to put it. And also, to get this motor in here, I had to chop this part out on both sides. This is, of course, being the driver's side. Had to chop that out. And then on this side, this part actually extends out further to catch a skid plate that I don't have on right now. I need to put that on there. But I had to chop that off too. It's just been crazy. But so yeah, so this is how it sits in here. The rear motor mount is right there. Yeah, those ones there. I put a 1-inch body lift on this just to give myself some clearance. Just kind of fits right there. I thought I was going to have to notch the body, bulge it out there a little bit, but once I put the body lift on, it did not have to do that. Another issue that I had with clearance is kind of on the other side of this bracket up there. Right here. Can we see? What am I doing? Just sort of where that hose clamp is. I thought I was going to have to, I kind of did have to dent the body out, and yeah, I had to cut part of the drive unit off too, just to make everything fit. It's pretty tight squeeze in here, but surprisingly, it works pretty well. So that's that. The drive shafts themselves are custom drive shafts from Tom Woods Driveline. They are relatively helpful, I guess. I've been trying to email them for the last couple of weeks or so with a few questions. Well, a question: what is this blue thing, and should I be worried about that being there? And I'm on some Wrangler TJ Facebook groups, and I asked them, and they immediately replied back, it's like, nope, don't worry about it, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, great. So why couldn't Tom Woods have just told me that? I don't know, but they didn't. Yeah, so custom drive shafts. And when I place this drive unit in here, you're not going to be able to see this, but the front differential is offset to the driver's side, and then the rear differential is centered. So in order to not have crazy drive shaft angles, the motor is not actually parallel with the Jeep, but it's kind of offset a little bit. So the motor is pointed more towards the passenger side, and the inverter on the other side, more towards the driver's side. So it's a little bit offset, and that's just to kind of reduce these driveline angles as much as I could. And yeah, so I mean, it's sort of a compromise, and it did the best what I could. And yeah, and I've got good clearance here. We've got a radiator hose that comes from the outlet of the drive unit, and that's what goes up to the bottom, or goes to the top radiator hose on the radiator hose. So good clearance there, nothing's hitting, so that's good. And yeah, but driveline angles, I don't know what this angle is. It's not extreme. I have about a 3-inch lift total on this, but I think these springs are technically 6-inch lift, but since I'm carrying so much extra weight that isn't really in the design of the springs, it's sitting lower than it should have, but I like where it sits. I'm very okay with that. I don't have a whole lot of travel in my suspension, which is kind of a bummer. I've only got about maybe 2 inches of travel in the suspension, and it actually bottoms out fairly easily. So that's kind of a bummer. These springs are actually custom springs from a company called Coil Springs, CCS, I think, Coil Springs Systems or something like that. And they're custom springs, and they were supposed to be heavier spring rates, but it wasn't heavy enough. I may end up revisiting that and buying another set of custom coil springs. That's another $600 or so, $700, but I think I'm going to end up doing that just because I want to have more up travel on the springs, so it doesn't bottom out so easy. So anyway, the rear drive angle, you can see maybe, is kind of steep, but that's only because I don't have the pinion angled up very high. I wanted to see what happens before I went and made any changes like that. If there was any driveline vibration or something, then I would have gone ahead and fixed it. But I'm pretty sure I've got them pretty even. In the front, it's less extreme. And the front the front pinion actually angles up higher than the back by design. The front pinion angle sort of determines your caster, and everything that I read suggests that the pinion angle pointing up should mimic the drive shaft angle coming down. So, and that's kind of what I did. So that's how that all is. What else to talk about down here? This is my e-brake. My e-brake, where is it? So just a linear actuator, pretty kind of simple. It goes up and clamps onto that bracket. That bracket is the lifting bracket for the whole motor. Right there where those, there's two sets of wire bundles that go in right there. Well, that is a hole in the center hump of the inside of the vehicle. So what I can do is take a panel off and then just run a chain down and connect that chain to the top of the drive unit, take the bolts off, and then lower the drive unit from the inside down, and then take it out that way. Yeah, and then this is just a linear actuator. It has an automatic stop, so like whenever I turn the parking brake off, it retracts in until it has a limit switch and turns itself off. And then whenever I apply the parking brake, I just sort of hold the button until I think it's time to stop holding the button. It'd be nice if it was sort of more automated, but I'm not sure how to do that, and I don't really care. I can push the button. It's no big deal. And so for cooling, there's a Honda Civic aluminum 3-quart radiator up front, and the coolant comes from that through this line. I'm going to turn you upside down here. Up to this, this is a Pierberg. It's called a Pierberg pump, but it's basically the same pump that Tesla uses in their cars. 3/4 inch hose all the way up here, and then it goes through there, goes into the drive unit in the back, and inside of a drive unit, it's kind of cool. Half of the coolant goes up this way and goes and feeds the rotor, and the other half of it comes around this way through this tube, this crossover tube, and it goes over to the inverter. I might have that wrong. It doesn't matter, but the point is that half of the coolant cools the rotor and the other half cools the inverter. And I was having some problems with that, and I fixed all that by upgrading the pump, upgrading my lines, and getting a bigger radiator. This is all kind of repeat information if you've been following this build, but if you haven't, I'm making this video for you. Oh, sorry. There we go. And then a mishmash of hoses up here. So now we're sitting looking up into the engine bay. This is the front battery box, and this line right here and this line right here are the two lines for the drive unit. These braided lines right here and these right here, these are all lines for the coolant system for the batteries. Now I'm not actually using it. It's plumbed and it works, it functions, but I haven't. It's winter right now, so I haven't determined that I need to have an active pumping coolant system on the batteries. I think the average amp draw that I'm using is about 100 or so amps, and at 100 amps the batteries aren't really even breathing very hard, so they get a little bit upset when you start pulling 300 amps for extended periods of time. So if I actually did any like sort of long road trips that tested the range of this battery, and then I was doing it at highway speeds, then it may end up being a problem, like in the summertime too. But for now anyway, I don't have anything. In the future, if I determine that I do need some sort of cooling for the batteries, then I can just break one of these lines here and mount like a transmission cooler or something. I don't know. I can revisit that at a later time. I hope I don't, because I'm not really sure what I'd do. So, yeah, that's that. And what else? So the coolant flow for the batteries, all the batteries within the battery modules the coolant lines are all in parallel. I've got manifolds, some coolant manifolds, so that the inlet of each of the modules all goes to one manifold, and the exit of each of the modules goes to the out manifold, and that's where these lines go. This goes up and feeds that manifold, and this one comes down and takes the coolant out of the batteries. So it goes from the pump, goes around this way and goes in, I might have said that, goes in here, supplies coolant to these batteries. Then it goes down the line, literally, down the line, and crosses over these aluminum lines, crosses over to that one up there. You can't really see it, you just gotta take my word for it. But anyway, it crosses over and it feeds the inlet for the battery box where the rear seat was, and then it comes across, comes across and goes up there and feeds the inlet for where the gas tank was for that battery box. And then that next one is the outlet for that one. And that outlet comes across and goes over here. No, it doesn't. Where does it go? Oh yeah. So there's two. There's one here, and then there's one over there. And that's how the batteries get their coolant. Anyway, and then it comes back down, follows the same path. I actually have two pumps. I actually have two pumps for the coolant system, because what was happening is that one single pump up there, probably because I'm using these 1/2-inch lines, it didn't have enough either volume or pressure or both, and it was sort of starving the battery box where the passenger seat is. And I only know that because I can see it. I can see the clear coolant lines in that battery box. So I installed this pump, and it basically just takes, this is coming from the front pump, and it just takes that and sort of boosts it and gives good coolant flow to these rear battery boxes. Yeah, so that's how that is. And what else is back here? Yeah, that's all I can think of for back here. These are my battery lines. So all these 16 Tesla modules are all in series, of course. And this is the I think this is the output for the, no, this is the, so it comes from the front. The most positive terminal is on the front battery box, and it goes from the most positive terminal of the battery box to the junction box inside the Jeep. Then from the negative terminal of that battery box, it comes along here, goes to this one here, or it goes to one of them, I don't know. But anyway, there's a positive and a negative of each of these battery boxes, and it goes so they're all in series. And these are like kind of quick disconnects. These are pretty sharp. They do a little 90-degree angle. I got these from, I want to say it was Amp Seal. I think these are Amp Seal connectors. And I think I got them off of Mauser, but yeah, they work really, really good. Just little quick disconnects. And I got them on each battery box. That way, if I ever need to service them, I can just disconnect those things and remove the box as necessary. And I think it kind of takes care of everything down here. Yeah, let's go up top. All right, so up here, the front battery box. This is 8 Tesla modules. And let me get my light. Eight Tesla modules, and back there, you see the green lines. That's my coolant lines. The back battery boxes have the same thing. Yeah. And so one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to try and maintain the original the original looks of the Jeep as much as possible, and I wanted to maintain the original wiring harness to a certain extent. So this is the factory fuse and relay box in its factory location, and most of the wires from that are still in use. Some of them have been tapped off. Some of these relays have been reassigned different positions. I don't know what these relays were originally, but now they are that. This is This is from a power steering. This one doesn't have a use, but it's. I've got wires going into the cab. I got both the control for this and the output for it. This was for the rear defroster, but I can figure out some other use for it at another time. This one I don't think I'm using at all. And this is my drive unit fan. The BMS, whenever you turn the key on, this relay becomes live, and it takes power from one of these fuses and feeds the BMS, and also gives power to the DC-DC converter, and yeah, and horn, vacuum pump, battery pump, and drive unit pump, water pumps. So these unpopulated ones are just, they were unpopulated from the factory, and I didn't have a way to populate them. Otherwise I would have, because it's always nice to have more fuses, and it's always nice. Some of these small relays, they were not populated, but I got a wiring harness from eBay, and I was able to populate them so that I could have them, because it's nicer to have them. And I wanted to avoid having external relays. There was a couple relays that I needed to have. That one back there, I'm not going to get into what that does, but it has to do with the DC-DC converter and charging. Yeah, 12-volt battery. It does have a conventional 12-volt battery in this spot. I haven't decided if I'm going to switch over to lithium or not. Probably not. I don't really care. Lithium is more expensive for a 12-volt battery. Sure, you save a few pounds, but I mean, you know, come on. It's not going to save a significant amount of weight on this thing. It is smaller, but I'm not crunched for space in that particular spot. And I think I'm just going to leave it. I probably need to get a new one, because that one loses voltage. But it's nice to, you know, so I can like jump start somebody. I had a Ford Ranger that was electric. It didn't have a 12-volt battery at all. And more than a few times I actually was in a parking lot where somebody's battery had died in their car. And they, you know, said, "Hey, can you jump start me?" And I'm like, no. I mean, I've got a really, really big battery in this trunk, but I can't actually jump start you. So I can now. And also it powers a winch, which is nice. Maybe, I don't know. I probably never use that either. I probably never have to jump start anybody, but all those things are there if I ever did. These are Smitty built front bumper. Actually, Smitty built everything: front bumper, side bumpers, and rear bumper. I went ahead and put a 2-inch receiver hitch on the front of that one. I've got it welded to the actual bumper itself. That was a kind of a no, I've got it welded to the frame. It's not attached to the bumper at all. That was kind of a fabrication nightmare, getting that thing in there, getting it square and flat and horizontal and perpendicular and parallel, and man, just like every possible angle that needed to be level, and I had to all hold it with one hand and weld it and tack it with the. That was a real pain in the butt. This Honda Civic radiator up here in front is kind of funny too. The most recent video, one of the most recent build videos I did, I sort of went into detail about this. Basically, what you're looking at now, the way it sits, sort of left and right, should have been up and down. So the left should have been up, or whatever. The right side should have been up. It doesn't matter. And yeah, I ended up taking off all of the original outlets and inlets from the Civic radiator, patched those up, and sort of welded in my own. Some of those patches aren't 100% watertight, so I do have some very, very small coolant leaks, which is more annoying than anything. And if it turns out that I need to do something about that at a later date, I can take this thing out and fix them. But it's not bad enough that I'm going to worry about it, so I'm going to let it sit there and just drip a little bit. That's how that's going to be. In the back there, I've got a 1200 watt Elcon DC-DC converter. Underneath that, you can't see it, but I've got a 3.3 kilowatt Brusa battery charger. So the DC-DC converter is, think of it as your alternator. That's your 12 volt battery charger. And then the Brusa is my 400 volt battery charger. That's the one that actually does something when you plug it into the wall. That is that back here. And inside, I do have a dome light, but I don't have it connected at the moment, because so inside doesn't look it looks a lot different, I guess. But obviously there's no shift or anything. That's the BMS there. The black box on top is the thermistor expansion module that gets all the temperature sensors from the battery and reports it to the BMS. Up in the dashboard on the left there, I've got a digital display. It's kind of like a little TV but that shows my RPM and my amp draw from the battery. It shows my inverter temperature, my motor temperature, and it shows my state of charge of the battery, and also how many amp hours I have left and what my voltage is. On the right there is just a GPS speedometer. You reset that speedometer every single time you drive it, and at the moment I don't know exactly what my range is going to be. In the Model S, this battery pack, which is a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack from basically the same car that the drive unit came from, Model S Performance, or maybe not, I don't know, but it would have gone at least 300 miles. I'm going to be pretty happy if I can get 180 out of this. The efficiency of this Jeep is poor. Yes, it's poor. In the back, that's where my back battery box is, right there. Got two JL Audio amps, 500 watts for the subwoofer there, 10-inch subwoofer, and 400 watts for the front speakers, which are underneath there, and then the soundbar speakers, which was up there. So yeah, and it sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good rolling down the road. Makes a lot of bass. And those 4.5 to 1 gears I was talking about, they have quite a bit of gear whine. I don't know if it was a manufacturing issue or something, but they made the tolerances a little bit too tight, so you end up with if you've ever heard some gears that don't have enough free play between them, they're just noisy. That's what it is. And at roughly 40 miles an hour is when it is the worst. The noise is the worst at about 40 miles an hour, and then once you get about 45 into 50, it kind of quiets out. And it's annoying. I hope it resolves itself over time. I don't know, but oh shoot, I don't know what else. Let's see. This is the charge port back here. So this is where the gas cap was. So you just do that, and you come over here, take your charger, and go. There you go. We're charging. And the back I swapped out normally there'd be a swing open door like this. Well, I traded that out for a drop down tailgate like what's in a CJ5. I think that's just a cooler design, and also it gives you somewhere to sit so that you can hang out and do your tailgate party things. Let's see. Yeah, that just about covers it. I need to get I think I'm going to have a wrap. I'm going to get a wrap put on this. Probably the same sort of darkish green, but maybe a more matte or semi-gloss finish. Yeah. But yeah, that'll be nice to get that done eventually. But I'm not really in a hurry for that. Need new fender flares and an LED kit. I'd like to get LED lights for the headlights. These ones work fine. They're yellow as they are, but they work fine. Once one of these blows out, then I'll go ahead and replace them with LEDs. I think that takes care of it, really. Don't really know what else to add. If you want any more details or want to know anything else about this thing, just send me a message, comment down in the comment section. I love to read the comments. If you have a question, somebody else probably does too. So if you've been following me this whole time, I really appreciate it, and I've had a lot of good suggestions and some constructive criticism, and I do value that quite a lot. And yeah, we'll just drive this for a while and see how it goes, and I'll give you updates every once in a while as needed. So thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.